Vismapanam, astonishing, Mahat, astounding. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation: Arjuna said, O King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who treated me exactly like an intimate friend, has left me alone. Thus, my astounding power, which astonished even the demigod, is no longer with me. Purport: in the Bhagavad Gita 10.41, the Lord says, anyone specifically powerful and opulent in wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge, and all that is materially desirable is to be considered but a product of an insignificant portion of the complete whole of my energy. No one, therefore, can be independently powerful in any measure without being endowed by the Lord. When the Lord descends to the earth along with his eternal, ever-liberated associates, he not only displays the divine energy possessed by himself, but also empowers his associate devotees with the required energy to execute his mission of incarnation. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.5 that the Lord and his eternal associates descend to the earth many times, but the Lord remembers all the different roles of incarnations, whereas the associates by his supreme will forget them. Similarly, the Lord takes away with him all his associates when he disappears from the earth. The power and energy which were bestowed upon Arjuna were required for fulfillment of the mission of the Lord. But when his mission was fulfilled, the emergency powers were withdrawn from Arjuna. Because the astounding powers of Arjuna, which were astonishing even to the denizens of heaven, were no longer required, and they were not meant for going back home, back to Godhead. If endowment of powers and withdrawal of powers by the Lord are possible even for a great devotee like Arjuna, or even the demigods in heaven, then what to speak of the ordinary living beings who are but fixed compared to such great souls? The lesson is therefore that no one should be puffed up or his powers borrowed from the Lord. The sane man should rather feel obliged to the Lord for such benedictions and must utilize such power for the service of the Lord. Such power can be withdrawn at any time by the Lord. So the best use of such power and opulence is to engage them in the service of the Lord.
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharya Nirvishweshwarshunavadi Pakshyati Deshitarvi Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasvindhubhya Evachana Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavasya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Lord, please guide us that we can learn from the example of your devotees how we can best serve you in this distressful and dangerous world. Hare Krishna. Sorry for the delay in reaching here. There was some miscommunication about the exact time of the class. So today, we'll be discussing the next section of what we started yesterday. So we'll continue the discussion based on what we discussed yesterday of how Arjuna is remembering Krishna and facing loss. The loss he is facing here is of everything that he has valued. So basically, this is the Bhagavatam. Among the many books that are there in the Vedic canon, the Bhagavatam is the book that is most focused on the theme of pain and loss. There are various books, and different books talk about different themes. The Ramayana talks about who's an exemplary person, what is the characteristics of exemplary person. The Bhagavata, the Mahabharata talks about what is dharma, what is the right thing to do. The Gita also is driven by the same question. Ichhamita dharma sammodha jetaha. Each of the Upanishads has a particular driving question. The Vedanta Sutra has a driving question. What is the meaning of the Upanishads? The Upanishads say Brahman is the ultimate reality, but what is Brahman? So each book has its own driving question. And not just among the Vedic canon, but even among the religious books of the world in general, the Bhagavatam is probably the book which is most focused directly on the ultimate loss that comes with death. That, in fact, one religious scholar has called it, the Bhagavatam is the world's most death-obsessed book. But, death-obsessed. Actually, we could say most of the world is obsessed with denying and forgetting death. And what is the ultimate reality? The Bhagavatam brings the forefront. That's interesting. So what we are discussing here is the idea that when we are focusing on this particular theme, so I'll talk about it today from three broad perspectives. First is the approach that I'm going to take over here. It's an elaboration of what we discussed. And then I'll talk about the context. What is happening to Arjuna? And then lastly, I'll talk about transcendence. So in this way, I'll be using this acronym ACT. What is the approach we take? What is the context? And how through that context, transcendence is to be achieved. So basically the idea is, let's say, if this is the text of the Bhagavatam, this is Krishna, this is transcendence. So now when we are approaching, we are here, we could approach the Bhagavatam from this side, we could approach the Bhagavatam from this side. What is the approach that we are taking? Then in the Bhagavatam, there are many incidents. So we are focusing on a particular incident. And so this is our approach. And the incident that we are approaching, what is the context in which we are approaching it? And we are seeing how the character there attained transcendence and how we can learn to attain transcendence. In general, when we study, any subject can be studied from many different perspectives. So what is the focus we are having right now? That is, okay, how do we approach the Bhagavatam? And what is going on in the Bhagavatam? And how can understanding that help us to attain transcendence? Help us come closer to it. So the approach, to some extent yesterday I talked about how what we remember reveals what we hold dear. So when Arjuna has lost the one thing that defined him as a person, his archery skills. And yet when he's expressing his agony, he doesn't even once mention in a very big way that I have lost my archery skills. He mentioned it he mentioned this over here that my Lord is lost and by that the Teja, the prowess is also gone. But after that, everything is a remembrance of the Lord and the heroic deed that he was able to achieve by the mercy of the Lord. So the loss of the archery skill is not something which he is focusing on. So that shows what his identification is primarily. So yesterday we discussed about how we have a fundamental identity and we have many functional identities. And when we function in the world, we identify with particular roles. Now, those roles, if we identify fully with them or excessively with them, that becomes illusion. So if I start thinking that I'm a male or I'm an Indian, and that becomes my defining identity, then that will be a form of Maya. Whereas think I'm a brahmachari or a grihastha, that also is Maya at one level. Naham viprona chinarpati chetu Mahaprabhu says. At the same time, our philosophy is that the world is itself not Maya. The world is real. So even the roles that we have in the world are real. And it is just that these are temporary reality. And the temporary reality is meant to help us go towards eternal reality. So this is the world and this is the spiritual world. So it's very difficult to go straight to the spiritual world from here. We go through our life journey to the spiritual world. We don't turn away from the world to go towards Krishna. That is the path of Maya. It's world rejection. Our path is the path of world engagement. And we are engaging in the world. At that time, we have to play particular roles. To play particular roles, we need to identify with those roles at least at a functional level. So, once the Hindu Mahasabha leader asked Prabhupada, Swamiji, you pronounce verses in a very Bengali way. And Prabhupada, what can I do? I'm a Bengali. So, Prabhupada was very non-defensively nonchalant about it. And Prabhupada was a Bengali. The soul was not Bengali. The soul was transcendental, but the body was Bengali. Prabhupada, when he spoke, he had a Bengali accent to it. So Prabhupada, so basically the point is, when we approach scriptures, it is very important to know how we are approaching it. I use the acronym LEAD. I think I had discussed this last year when I had come. I brought in there are 4 ways in which scripture can be approached. You remember the 4 things? L is literal. So these are stories that happen as they are, and that's all there is. So we can learn from the story and enjoy the story, and that's all there is to it. So the general masses focus on this level, just the literal level. Now beyond that is the ethical level. So here we look at what is right and what is wrong. So for example, Srila Prabhupada, in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, seems to glorify Arjuna. He's not rushing into actions, he's thoughtful, he's analytical, and he is trying to decide what is right and wrong. And suddenly in the second chapter, Arjuna is in tears. Prabhupada said tears are a sign of ignorance, attachment, and everybody is suffering from the skin disease. And Krishna is speaking the Gita to enlighten. So at the ethical level, sometimes the focus is not on who is right, but what is right. So sometimes the same character may be analyzed in different ways because the focus is not so much to judge the character. The focus is to learn what is the best thing for us. So sometimes in the Chitraketu pastime, so we may have that Chitraketu being cursed by Parvati. Sometimes Prabhupada may say that Chitraketu, none of the sages were laughing. Why did he have to laugh over it? And we should not offend great sages. And then later on Parvati curses and Shiva glorifies Chitraketu. So he says, none of the sages took any action. Why did Parvati have to take action? No, we should not rush to judgment. We should not curse people. So the point over here is that in the ethical approach, our focus is not on characters themselves, but what we can learn from them. Then there is the allegorical approach. The allegorical approach is where we look at some of the symbolisms. What do the characters represent? So for example, we study the Ramayana, we can study who is Ravan, but we can also study what is Ravan. So Ravan was a historical person, but Ravan is also a trans-historical mentality, not transcendental, but an entity mentality that pervades throughout history beyond a particular time. So what is Ravan is a much more important question than who is Ravan. The Ravana mentality may come within us also in different ways. And then D is the devotional. Now at the devotional level, our focus is primarily on seeing everything simply as a Leela. So for example, Prabhupada says this, Arjuna's illusion was created by Krishna so that the Bhagavad Gita would speak. So at a devotional level, we don't go to the ethical level at all. We just focus on relishing the reciprocation of love between the Lord and the devotee. So each of these is a different approach. And for us, if you want to learn life lessons, whether it is for daily life or for devotional life, the ethical approach is the best. The devotional approach is primarily for relishing. So there is some analysis, but the analysis is also for primary relishing. It's not so much for learning like this. So we are taking the ethical approach right. Say for example, the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada will say Bhishma Pitama is a pure devotee, he's a Mahajana. And in this Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says that Bhishma remained silent when Draupadi was disrobed and therefore he deserved to be killed. So, is he a Mahajana or is he a person who is guilty of a crime that deserves capital punishment? Well, it depends on the perspective we are taking. So the reality as it is very complex, but it can be approached at different levels. So we are approaching right now at the ethical level to learn from Arjuna how we can live in a way so that we can attain the devotional, the transcendental. So our focus here is on learning from Arjuna and Arjuna's actions, how to function in our lives. So in the world, the world is a place where, as it is called, opposite of Vaikuntha is a place of anxiety. And eventually, the anxiety is because there is always the fear of loss. Loss could be loss of opportunity, loss of wealth, loss of health, loss of reputation, loss of resources, loss of loved ones, loss of life. There are many different kinds of losses. Sometimes we get loss of words to describe how many losses are there in this world. Isn't it? So many different ways people can lose things. I just met one devotee teacher who was traveling across. Very dynamic teacher. And one day he was giving a class. In the middle of the class, he lost his voice. He just couldn't speak at all. He was just moving and he couldn't speak. And he went to a doctor. No doctor could detect what is wrong. They said that there is some connection with your brain and there's a nerve over here. That nerve is connected with the tympanic nerve and with some kind of throat nerve, so not here, ears. And that nerve will stop functioning. So when will this recover? They say we don't know the cause, we don't know what we can do. So it is like the worst nightmare scenario. It's if there is a disease, at least you know what is the disease, you know what is the cure. It just came out of nowhere. It's just somehow that nerve has stopped functioning. Was there a head trauma? Was there a throat trauma? No knowledge. And then it is just he is desperately running from pillar to post, trying this, trying that, trying this. And this told you cannot speak at all. So he said, I just learned typing and all my communication was through typing. I saw that he was driving me in a car. That he was actually able to type with one finger at a faster speed than what I could type with two fingers. Or right, both hands, like one finger with both hands. The human spirit is incredibly resilient. When one door closes, another door opens. Anyway, for him, he tried different speech therapists. And one devotee connected with a speech therapist in the Middle East. And the therapist says, this party, you do this kind of exercise, you do this kind of pressure and massage. And just like it was for 15 days of night, when suddenly the voice came back. It is. So he told me this, then we read this section of the Bhagavatam together. He says, for a speaker, the defining attribute is your speaking ability. You can lose everything. Losing speaking ability is like the worst nightmare. So that's what in this world, what we may lose. And there's so many ways in which we lose things. We just can't figure it out. So the world can be a very, this is not to scare us. The world is a scary place, but the point is not to be scared. The point is to turn toward Krishna. So sometimes it may happen that a devotee may lose cognitive ability. First time in our movement when some devotee, some senior devotees and spiritual masters, they start losing, they call Parkinson's. Now, losing physical ability is one thing. If somebody gets Alzheimer's and starts losing cognitive ability, somebody starts getting dementia, that becomes very difficult to process. Because the person is there, but the person is not there. And the kind of losses that can be there in the world, it's very, very difficult to process. So Arjuna is here facing what he could call the loss that could have led to a loss of complete identity for him. So broadly, the losses that we suffer in our life can be put into two categories. One is the loss of means, and the second is the loss of meaning. Loss of means are resources that we may have. So, for example, wealth could be a resource, a talent could be a resource, a reputation could be a resource. If somebody is a counselor, a mentor, a speaker, now they may not be concerned about reputation in the sense of fame, but if the reputation is spoiled, nobody will come and hear them. So Mahaprabhu says, "Sannyasi Ralpachitra Sarva Loka Gaya." That the point is reputation is also important. Reputation is a means. But there can be the loss of means. Somebody can lose wealth. Somebody can lose health. Somebody can lose reputation. But there are many means. A loss of meaning is where we may end up not being able to function because what is the point of living? What is the point of doing anything? Now, in one sense, means and meaning are slightly related. For some people, so it's interesting, in Sanskrit, the word artha is used for both. Artha ke anek artha hai. So artha ka ek artha hai artha. What does that mean? That one meaning of artha is meaning itself. So when we use the word artha in terms of wealth, like Bharat ke artha mantra, so there is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So there artha refers to the means. But then all these four are purusharthas. These are the purposes of life. These are what give meaning to life. So what happens for all of us is that we have artha in the sense of means, and we have artha in terms of meaning also. Now for different people, depending on how they are functioning, the means itself may be the basis of meaning in their life. If somebody is a surgeon, and the surgery is not just a job that they do, but that is how they define themselves. And if there's an accident and they lose their hands in that, then what is the point of my living? The means can become the meaning of that. Somebody is an athlete, and their physical ability is what defines them. So then, at that time, if they lose that physical ability, it can be utterly devastating. How do we function? So we all need to find some artha somewhere in life. Some means and some meaning. Ideally speaking, both are required in life. The loss of means can be a problem. The loss of meaning can be a problem. As I said, that suppose nowadays in colleges, at least in India, in America also to some extent, but in colleges, top colleges like IIT, students sometimes end their lives. It's tragic when it happens. And generally in India, when students end their lives, largely, at least till 5 years ago, 10 years ago, largely because of academic pressure and the fear that they're not performing well. So now in America, wherever there's suicide, it is generally not because of academic performance so much. If it happens, it's more because of heartbreak. It is so basically what happens is India is a very academically conscious country. The pressure of expectations is very high. And then a person's whole identity and self-worth gets reduced to the marks that they get. They don't do well. So what happens is there's a loss of performance. But then if one is defining oneself too strongly, then if I am not a top student, if I'm not a good student, if I'm a failure, what is the point of living? So the loss of means can lead to a loss of meaning. See, generally in spiritual circles, desires are often demonized. That we have to give up desires. But actually, giving up desire is a very dangerous state. See, there is too much desire. The desire is too much. That is a rajoguna. That will lead to infatuation.
Some people may get infatuated with some romantic partner. Somebody may get infatuated with wealth. There is too much desire, that is Rajoguna, that leads to infatuation. But if there is too little desire, that is tamas. And that leads to depression. So depression has many features to it. But one of the defining features of depression is, what is the point of doing anything? So the absence of desire is not a sign of transcendence. Now, the absence of selfishly driven desire, self-centered desire that is there. But when people have a very self-centered conception of life, and we tell them give up desires, actually they don't rise up from rajas to sattva or shuddha sattva, they may go down to tamas. So the process of bhakti is not so much about giving up desires as taking up higher desires. That we take up higher desires. Prabhupada's defining attribute was not his learning, not his renunciation. He was, of course, very learned, very renounced. But what differentiated Prabhupada from all his God brothers who also illustrious in their own way was that he had a stronger desire than them to carry out the instruction of his spiritual master. And it was that desire that drove him to come to America at the age of 70 without any support. So what we need is that we need to selection of desires. It is not rejection of desires, but selection of desires. It is which desire is what will bring the most meaning in my life. And we focus on those desires. So generally speaking, when a person faces loss, they may go in the direction of what is the point of living? And then it can be very, very damaging. So basically, if you see over here, where am I going at right now? That I talk loss of means can be a problem, loss of meaning can be a problem. For some people, the means itself may cause the loss of means itself may cause the loss of meaning. Like somebody, like in India, there are farmers, there were actually some years ago, in Maharashtra and the places, they would just not be able to earn a livelihood. And then, because they're not able to earn a livelihood, they are poverty stricken, they are debt ridden, they would end their lives. The loss of means can lead to a loss of meaning. So I was in Canada and I met one young man. He said he was there in Sri Lanka when the tsunami had hit. And his family had a shop. And he was just going from the shop to his home. And he saw suddenly the ocean rising. And he didn't know what was happening. Before that tsunami, nobody had heard of the tsunami also. The third tsunami. It just burst into the world's vocabulary at that time. Somehow saw the ocean rising, he just ran and he climbed up on a tree and somehow he survived. And there's water everywhere. Then he came down, he was near his shop, so first he went to his shop had disappeared. Then he ran back, his entire home had disappeared. There's no one alive. He said, so for some people, maybe their job is the source of the meaning, and joy is the source of the means, and family is the source of meaning. And one moment, both are lost. It can be utterly devastating. So Indrajit Maharaj had taken devotees over there, and the devotees are also movement had got financial support, and he had provided lots of food, charity, and food and support like that. So when our devotees were there, at that time, the international relief had come all over. They said that we have got enough food supplies, but everybody here is traumatized. Do you have some trauma therapy? What can you do? At a mass level, we don't have psychologists who can talk with all these people. So then the devotees started doing kirtans. Hare Krishna Kirtan, nobody was following. Then one devotee came and told Maharaj, Maharaj tells his classes that he said, Maharaj, here people don't know Krishna, here should be Ram. So then they started doing Shri Ram Jai, Ram Jai. They started singing and people came and sat. Everybody was glum, lost. It's an inconceivable disaster. But somehow, then Kirtan started picking up, people started participating in Kirtan, and to say that there's some light and some hope coming back in people's eyes and people's lives. So he said he was there in one of those Kirtans, and somehow I felt I should do something. So at that time, he because of he got a refugee status, he was able to come to Canada, and he got connected with devotees in Canada. So when I travel across the world, one of the things I see is that life can cause incredible pain and suffering. And the human spirit is so strong that it can find incredible ways to bounce back, to be resilient. Now, of course, how you are resilient is important. So what has happened for, as I said, there can be the loss of means among various losses. The loss of means is bad. The loss of meaning is worse. But loss of both at the same time would be the worst. And this is the situation of Arjuna right now. For Arjuna, the means was archery. The meaning for him was service to the Lord. And then in one moment, he's lost the means, he's lost the meaning. So how do you live at that time? It's just that a person can get completely disoriented and devastated. It is how Arjuna is remembering and recovering is actually very, very difficult to process. Now, as I said, the human spirit. Now, the human spirit is not a word that Prabhupada used. I'm using the word spirit over here in a non-literal sense. The spirit can mean energy. This person has got a very positive spirit. The spirit can be used literally to refer to the soul, the spiritual level of reality. But the spiritual level of reality is also the source of energy. So this person has a very positive spirit. I like the spirit of this person. That means I like the attitude, the energy. So the human spirit is actually very resilient. And in different ways, we all find ways to bounce back. But when somewhere we have to find some meaning and move on. Otherwise, it's very difficult. And that's why when we are preaching, it's very important that we do not destroy people's present source of meaning. Because if we destroy people's present source of meaning, we want to expand their source of meaning to the ultimate source of meaning. But if we destroy people's present source of meaning, then they may have nothing left to live for. What am I going to do in life? So I remember I was at one place and gone. I knew that devotee that was a bit of hardline spiritual. But he had invited me to come to his place, so I had gone. That was a time when I was trying to build bridges between the liberals and conservatives in our movement. Then I realized if I try to build a bridge, you get burned from both sides. So I was trying to do podcasts with all kinds of devotees from different places. But anyway, so I had gone there, and this devotee introduced me. He says, this devotee is so sincere that when his wife refused to become a devotee, he divorced. I was shocked at three levels. First of all, whatever be the reason, divorce is something to be celebrated. He said that is something even in material circles. People don't celebrate. Of course, there are people who are weird. There is a new species of thing that has come up. We have a breakup party people have nowadays. You have a wedding party, you have a breakup party. It's very weird. Even in material circle, it's considered weird. Actually. Divorce is not something to be celebrated, no matter what is the cause. And then the second thing is, okay, even if there's divorce, how do we want that somebody breaking up their family to be seen as the sign of seriousness of bhakti? Is that, Prabhupada did his responsibilities for 30, 40 years. Is that the sign of seriousness of devotion? And the third is this something which you want to glorify? In what we glorify, we replicate. So what is happening is there are two ways to go. Like there is Artha and there is Paramartha. So Artha is our present source of meaning. Paramartha is the ultimate source of meaning. Paramartha is what? The ultimate source of meaning is Krishna. Param Artha. Now present Artha could be various things. For most people, it is going to be their family. Now, people try to find artha in their job, but then how much can a job can't talk back with you? The job can't really give you emotional support. So that's why people become workaholics. That becomes their artha. So the normal way in the Vedic tradition is from artha, gradually through progression, we move towards parama. It's not that we reject artha, but we build up on artha to go towards paramartha. Now, in some situations, it may be that a person just rejects artha and goes towards paramartha. So one approach is rejection of artha to go towards paramartha. The other is progression from artha towards paramartha. So in 3.26, Krishna recommended this approach. Yesterday I spoke on this was Buddhi Vedam Janeda Jnanam Karma Sangina. Don't disturb the minds of people who are ignorant. Elevate them gradually. Now, some people may say 18.66 is talking about this approach. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. However, if you see what Krishna is talking about over here is that Arjuna, if you are confused about what dharma to follow, Arjuna was torn between two dharmas, his Kula dharma and his Kshatriya dharma. Like if you are working in a company and sometimes somebody working in a software company, they may be part of two teams. Now, at the same time, two team leads may tell a person, you do this and you do this. Now, that can lead to what do I do? I can't do both things at the same time. That is a dharma sammoha, dharma sankata. So then suppose this person has maybe it's not a very big company and the CEO is accessible. But the person goes to CEO and tells, both these team leads are asking me to do this. So the CEO will tell you, do this. And what about the other person? You say, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. So I will deal with the team. So the idea is 18.66 is a misapplication. 18.6 is very contextual. Krishna is not telling Arjuna that you give up all dharma to come to Paramatma. Rather, when there is a confusion of dharma, you do that dharma which will enable you to do mamekam sharanam. Give up your conceptions of what is the thing to do and do what I am telling you to do. But that means it's not that Arjuna is becoming adharmic to do mamekam sharanam. He's actually choosing the dharma which will enable him to do mamekam sharanam. And in that case, it's a Kshatriya dharma. Of course, Arjuna does not identify as a Kshatriya as much as he identifies as a devotee. And he's serving Krishna. But how is he serving Krishna? In the Kshatriya role. So now we're talking about how to process loss in life. Until now I talked about loss can be of artha and of means and meaning. Arjuna has faced a loss of both. So when we are facing loss in life, the point I made is that we should not be destroying people's existing structure of meaning. Otherwise, they may be left with nothing. They may be left with nothing in life. It is that each one of us, we need some structure in life. And intellectually, we may say this is Paramartha. This Krishna is the ultimate source of meaning. Can we live at that level? Can we actually connect only with Paramartha, with no artha in our life right now? How many of us can simply become Babajis? For us, even if we understand Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, like we need some artha here, right? Artha could mean some service which helps us get some tangible results in this world. We often talk about lost souls in the material world. When I travel across our movement, I see that there are many lost souls in our movement also. What do I mean lost souls? See what happens for us? We have the ultimate goal. We want to go back to Krishna, we want to develop love for Krishna. But what is the artha that will take me to Paramatma? What is the service that I will do right now? That you say, okay, chant Hare Krishna, do your sadhana. That's important, no doubt. But we cannot be doing our sadhana 24 hours a day. Very few of us are at that level. And even if somebody was at that level, Prabhupada didn't want us to be at that level. Didn't want us to stay only at that level. Because Uttamadhikari comes down to Madhyama level, and the Prabhupada wanted us to function at that level. So, those devotees who don't have a service, they're really lost. So most devotees feel I have too much service. And that's why I can't balance my time. But actually, well, not being able to balance time is a problem, but you're not having service is a far bigger problem. So it is now we could say this is my service to Krishna and it is Paramartha. It is not Artha. Well, yes and no. Yes, because it is service to Krishna, so it is Paramartha. But we also get some level of fulfillment at the material level in the material world through our service. And without that, it's very difficult to function. If somebody tells us, okay, you go to this place and you just preach at this place. And for the rest of your life, nobody will come for your classes, but you go to your classes. That's your service. Now, yes, we may be going closer to Krishna, but will we really have the motivation to continue that if we don't see some artha, some result over here? It's going to be difficult. So my point is, it is we progress from artha to paramartha. It is not so much by rejecting artha as by realizing that artha is actually insufficient. It is, there are two ways of looking at artha. How do we go beyond artha to paramartha? One is by two ways. One is by realizing that it is illusory. The other is by realizing it is insufficient. It is illusory means it has no value. The insufficient means it has value, but the value is not sufficient. So it is generally for us, somebody is a devotee does service, a devotee does kirtan, a devotee does preaching, that devotee does deity worship, a devotee does cooking, and we do the service well, we are praised for it. That inspires us to do more and more service. And then afterwards start realizing after some time, okay, that this praise is not really sufficient. This praise doesn't fulfill my heart. Rather, if I'm expecting praise too much, that keeps me dissatisfied. Rather, I focus on Krishna and I try to serve Krishna. That's when we get the ultimate meaning in life. That's what enables us to move towards. So for a devotee who does not have artha and they just try to go towards paramartha, then what happens is those devotees start criticizing artha for everyone else. You are doing this for money. Like I may say that, okay, if I give a class and people will praise me for my class, so I'll become proud of it. So I say I'll not give any classes. If I do kirtan, if somebody can do kirtan, they do kirtan, I'll sing and I'll become proud of it. But then what happens is, we may say that we will not, okay, I'll not do anything, she'll give me fame. But in this world, service is required. Somebody else does kirtan nicely and then they are praised. When they are praised, oh, this devotee is such nice kirtan. From inside of the club, but you have seen how much prasad this devotee takes. So what will happen is that we say I don't want pride, but what will come is envy. So we will try to minimize those by others by saying that, oh, they are mundanely motivated or they are trying to find faults with them. So the way to go beyond pride is not by rejection of talent. It is by purification of intent. And that will happen gradually. It is our talent that gives us some artha. And then afterwards, we realize that artha is not sufficient. And then we go towards paramartha. So we go the purification from pride. The purification from pride. How does this happen? It is not by rejection of talent. It's a very self-centered view to say that I don't want to become proud, so I won't use my talent. Well, our talents are not ours. Our talents are gifts given by Krishna to us. And we are meant to be custodians. We are meant to use those talents. So rejection of talent is not the way. It is purification of intent. Rather not purification from pride, we can say. How do we go beyond pride? How do we actually go beyond pride? It is by purification of intent. So each one of us needs to come to this level of purification of intent. But how will we come to that purification of intent? It is by an incremental process. So for example, it's like first we need to become devotees. It's like for most people, how it is there is service, then there is devotional service. And then after that, there will be pure devotional service. So if we expect someone to start doing pure devotional service, somebody is say not even at the level of service, and we take them from here and expect them to jump till here all the way, then what has happened is most people will go down instead of going up. They'll not be able to rise. So service and devotional service, this is the artha. Pure devotional service will be the paramartha. So most people will find it very difficult to come to the level of paramartha automatically. Most people will come to Krishna because what they think is artha in their life is in trouble. Maybe their child is having some terrible disease and they don't know whether the child will be cured. They come to Krishna and pray for it. That's why when we use the word material and spiritual, sometimes material and spiritual is an inadequate describer of differences. Because in material and spiritual itself, there is material, there is sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. And material is a one word which includes everything. And sattvic can be a sense of artha for people. And that is a good thing for them. So we could separate that. Give up. This is the material. I'm drawing the material bigger over here simply because it is bigger in our perception at present. So we could say just give up the material. All of this is Maya and just go toward the spiritual. Now we may talk about it, but it's very difficult for anyone to do this. So there's another within our philosophy itself. There is spiritual. There is spiritual, and within the material, there is sattva, there is rajas, and there is tamas. So all of this is material. And all of this cannot be considered to be the same thing. So sattva can be a source of artha for a person. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in fact says that rajas is actually better than tamas. His rajas is actually, tamas is like total poison. And rajas can be an antidote for tamas. What does that mean? If there is a rajasic parent, they may not have any interest in their child's spiritual life. But if their child is sick, they will move heaven and earth to save the life of their child. But if the parents are tamasic, the parents themselves are stoned on drugs, they don't even know their child exists. I was in California and one devotee works in car design in one company. So I was telling that I had read about this also, and he confirmed that. Basically, it happened that in America you don't have children sitting on the front. Children never sit on the parents' laps, the mother lap. There's a separate child seat. The child is very small, and the child seat is at the back, and it's turned backward also, so that even if the impact is not that severe. So it happened apparently 4 or 5 times in the last couple of years that the parents or the parent, they got out of the car and they forgot they had a child. And they locked the car and went up. Now, how can you forget you have a child? So people who forget their child should forget the idea of having a child. But it's too late for that. They already have a child. So the proposal was that all cars should be equipped with some alarm sensors, so that if the back child seat is occupied and the doors are closed and the front seats are not occupied, then the car should start beeping. Like, if somebody breaks into a car and the car is about to be stolen, the car starts beeping. So now the opposite to the proposal is this. Some people who forget the children, for all of them, everybody has to pay a tax and create a system by which that sensor is made. Now, the point is, parents who can forget their child are totally tamasic parents. And the world will really have a dark future if the parents are tamasic. So Rajasic is not good as compared to Sattvic or Suddha Sattva. But definitely it's better than tamasic. So, there is, in tamas, there is practically no sense of artha for people. So there is a more and more evolved sense of artha in Rajas and Sattva. So we each need some sense of artha in our life. So for us, when we lose artha, we have to find some other sense of artha. If we don't find some other sense of artha, then that will lead to another. So how does this work? I'll give you a couple of examples and then we'll talk one principle and we'll conclude the class. See, sometimes we rigidly separate between material and spiritual life. And to some extent, that may be helpful. But the point is, it is not so much material and spiritual as it is a progression from artha to parama. So when we are dealing with people, it is for us to observe what is the artha in their life. And from that artha, how do you move towards parama? And everyone has to find their way towards parama from wherever they are in life. So most of you know I have polio. So when I was growing up, my mother took a lot of care of me. My father was traveling, had a traveling job. He was not there. So it was now my brother has got a baby and I recognizing that how difficult it is to take care of a child. That it is difficult to take care of even one child, but if the child has special needs, is physically disabled, it's much more difficult. But never once did my mother make it feel that I was a burden to her or that my leg was a burden to her. She was always very affirmative and positive. One of her statements always stayed with me that she actually told a relative and I heard that whatever he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually. And that statement always stayed with me and I studied and I grew up. So when I was in my 10th standard, I did quite well in my exam. So because I was physically handicapped, so I was supposed to get some award from the district collector of Nasik. But then the district collector said, I will come to your home. Because I could have gone to him because I was physically handicapped, I'll come. So my father used to work in the government, my mother was working in a bank, government bank. So for our family, it was a big thing. So the district collector came to our home, and their photo, the next day our photo came in, our whole family photo came in the newspaper. And that was the day of my birthday. So it's like, somebody can say all your dreams are fulfilled. On your birthday, your photo comes in a newspaper, your whole family is there. And that very night, my mother was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer. And she was having some jaw issues. None of us knew about the gravity of the issue, but it was 4th stage. So we didn't even know what it was. That day, there's no internet. This is 1990s. So when the diagnosis came, this is leukemia. I thought I had a good vocabulary. I thought I know this word. So it was, and I thought I remember this is blood cancer. It can't be blood cancer. But anyway, it was just the day when it was like the topmost day of my life, suddenly like the whole earth was pulled out. And within 1 month, it was all over. It was utter devastation for her. But then I didn't even know how to live. I had a younger brother my parents had decided that because I had this physical handicap, they wanted to focus on trying to heal me. So they decided not to have a child for quite some time. So between me and my younger brother, there's an 11-year age difference. So my father told me that my mother told him that I should take care of my younger brother. And somehow, in the fog at that time that was going in my mind, so that became the artha for me. That I was living to please my mother. I was close to my father, but much closer to my mother. And mother suddenly going off my life. What my mother told you, take care of your younger brother. So that became a source of artha for me. And then I continued on after 3-4 years. That's when I started reading philosophical books more. But then I was introduced to Bhagavad Gita. And the pastime there are 2 pastimes, and one pastime was extremely difficult for me to accept. That was Chitraketu pastime. Chitraketu says, what mother, what father? That it's all, all the love of the mother and the father, it's all Maya. I just couldn't accept it. And that without my mother and her caring for not just love in a sentimental sense, I know how much she sacrificed. Without that, I would not have survived. I would not have grown. And then, so that was when I was getting introduced to Krishna consciousness, the 2-3 things that gave me serious thought about whether I should pursue Krishna consciousness ahead of. This was this idea that the parents' love for a child is Maya. I just couldn't accept that. And then fortunately for me, I happened to read the Dhruva Maharaj pastime, and there is that statement where Dhruva's mother tells him that whatever love I can give you, Vishnu can give you millions of times more. So now, that gave me such relief. Because Dhruva's mother, Suniti, she is not denying her love for a child. Now, if her love for a child is Maya, if that is zero, then million times zero is still zero. So her love is real, but Vishnu's love is far, far more. So that really inspired me. That if my mother's love for me is just like a drop in this, I could have seen that as this is so insignificant. But it is no. A drop seemed so large for me that it sustained my life. Then how much bigger would the ocean be? So that artha to paramartha. Then one of my favorite verses, Tomeva Mata Chapita. Many times this is presented in the impersonalist way. But it's not impersonal. It doesn't have to have impersonal reading. That whatever love we get from our mother, whatever love we get from our father, whatever friendship we get from our siblings or our friends, Tomeva Mata Chapita Tomeva, Tomeva Bandhushya Sakha Tomeva. It's interesting, the first 4 lines are about people. The next 2 lines are about things. Tomeva Vidya Dravidam Tomeva. The idea is, as we grow up, Vidya can also be a source of artha for us. As we grow up, money can also be a source of artha for us. Tomeva Vidya Dravidam Tomeva. That whatever is the source of artha for us, the vision that the Bhakti tradition gives us is not that the artha is Maya. It is that the artha is getting its artha from Paramatma. That our mother is able to love us because it is Krishna who is blessing her. Krishna it is. A mother gives her breast milk to a child. That is one of the most intimate acts of love. But it is not that the mother, so it is certainly the mother's love, no denying it. At the same time, it is not just the mother's love. The mother does not do anything special at that time to manufacture milk in her breasts. The same God who sent a child through her womb into the world also sends milk in her breast to take care of the child. So this capacity to link Artha and Paramatma, that is actually the vision of Bhakti. So what happens is that so now there are 2 extremes. We get only Artha. If we have only Artha, that's one extreme, and if you have only Paramartha. Now, only Paramartha, in principle, that can be wonderful, but in practice, it can be dreadful. In principle, I don't care anything except Krishna. But can we live like that? It is only Artha, of course. It is good to have some Artha, but the problem is when Artha, anything good, the Artha becomes the Paramartha for some. When Artha becomes the Paramartha, that leads to Anartha. What does Anartha means? That say, now Artha can be money. So if money becomes the Paramartha for someone, that's when it leads to greed. The male-female attraction is a natural feature of the material world. It is by the male-female attraction that the human species continues. It is by the male-female attraction that the pair bonding happens. Now, there are some species where there is no pair bonding. Among all species in the world, pair bonding means the couple who unite, they feel attracted to each other and they bond with each other. So now, among all species, it is only humans who, it's only human progeny that requires so much care for so long. No other species requires that. And for at least first few years, the baby is helpless without them. And even for till 10, 12, 14, children cannot fend for themselves. So the pair bonding is essential. That the couple bond with each other, and that bonding happens through it may be the physical intimacy, but formally it is through wedding. So that pair bonding is very important. And now what happens is when pleasure becomes the sole purpose. Now, is there pleasure in the procreative act? It is there. The Bhagavatam says that pleasure is given, arranged by the Lord. But when the procreative act is done only for pleasure, without reproduction, without procreation, or even without pair bonding, just people to hook up, there's a hookup culture, then that becomes anartha. But the dharma aviruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatacharya. It is the artha that can lead people to paramartha. I talk with many devotees and they tell me that when they have a child, they have to take care of the child. That responsibility of taking care of the child makes them pray to Krishna far more intensely than what they would pray other days. Now, we may call it material, we may call it spiritual. This is for the child's spiritual growth. So it's generally an artha that takes us to Paramatma. We may chant Hare Krishna nicely, but if we have some service and that service is not working out and pray to Krishna intensely, then that is generally artha that takes us to Paramatma. But when artha itself becomes the Paramartha, that can lead to an artha. The work is important, but if work itself becomes the defining thing of a person's life, then the person becomes an alcoholic. So it becomes a workaholic. So only artha is a problem. Now, only Paramartha, what is the problem in this is that it is extremely rare that somebody can live at this level. For most people, only Paramartha will actually lead to a relapse, to a very lower artha. Very lower artha means what? That somebody will fall to sensual pleasures, somebody will fall to things which are quite bad. Bhaktisaraj Thakur talk about how the Babajis used to stay over there. When Gokushal Babaji's Samadhi was to be done, he said, let his body be touched by anyone who has not touched a woman in the last 6 months. The last 1 month, last 1 week. And none of the so-called Babajis would commend. They will come forward to take his body. Then Bhaktisaraj Thakur took his body. So it's very, very difficult to stay at the level of Paramartha. So what we need, the balance stages, artha that will take us to Paramartha. There could be many artha in our life, but we have to see which artha do I focus on so that it can take me towards Paramartha. So taking care of my family can take me towards Paramartha. And that's how, say, the Grahasthashrama works. And as goes one towards Vanaprastha, towards sannyas. In sannyas also there is some artha that is there. But that artha may be more directly connected. One is focusing on preaching, one is focusing on expanding the mission. But generally it is artha, through artha that we go towards Paramartha. Now for Arjuna, what has happened is, for him, at one level, artha was the archery. A bigger artha was his service to Krishna. That is of course Paramartha. But when he lost both of them, that is when, towards the end, he remembers Krishna and then finally he remembers what? The message of the Bhagavad Gita. And now the Bhagavatam does not describe which shloka from the Bhagavad Gita does he remember. Now, I have looked at our Acharya's commentary. None of the Acharyas specifically say which shloka it is. I looked at the Sri Sampradaya and their commentaries. So now different Acharyas have different opinions, and since we don't really, our tradition is focused on a particular thing, but it is among the shlokas that it is quite likely that each Acharya has a favorite shloka. And they may say that this is the shloka that remembers at that particular time. But there are 2-3 shlokas that the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas mention, that there is mat chittaha sarva durgani mat prasadat tarishyasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all obstacles by my grace. So basically, the import given is that Arjuna remembers that Krishna is with me even when he is not with him. That Krishna in his manifest form may not be there, but Krishna in his unmanifest form is still here. And that is the remembrance that gives him shelter. But for him who has lived with Krishna's manifested form, for him to live without a manifest form becomes extremely difficult. And that's why Arjuna and the Pandavas all decide to renounce the world. And they go to the Himalayas. And they attain Krishna thereby. So, but the point is that for each one of us, what Arjuna is showing over here is, in times of extreme shelter, extreme danger, when Artha seems to be taken away from our life, we may take shelter of Paramartha. And we should take shelter of Paramartha. At the same time, say when Draupadi was being dishonored, her husbands were there, and it is that none of them could help her. She took shelter of Krishna. Now there are some imaginative retellings of the Mahabharata. There's one particular imaginative and by not a devotee. So where the whole Mahabharata is told from the perspective of Draupadi. Draupadi is speaking in the first person. So there is this question raised by some Sri Vaishnava scholars that, how did Draupadi accept her husbands after they had abandoned? If you focus on that particular moment, then Krishna protected her. But it is not that while her husband didn't protect her, she did reject them. So what was she thinking at that time? How was she able to, that you abandoned me in my time of need? So why didn't she abandon them? How did she stay with them? So she understood that Yudhishthira was a virtuous person. And Yudhishthira had made a miscalculation. There's an elaborate discussion in the Mahabharata afterwards in the forest. Draupadi asked, how could you have gambled like this? How could you gamble everything away? And Yudhishthira pours out his heart. See, for a person who wants to live dharmically, for that person to give up dharma or to do something adharmic is like the most nightmarish thing to live with. So when Draupadi talks with Yudhishthira, she sees that Yudhishthira himself is filled with remorse and guilt. It's like what happens for him is he wants to follow his not spiritual master, his elder's instruction. Dhritarashtra tells him, fight. Now come and play the gambling match. And he thinks the best way to maintain peace in our family is by following the elders. But then following for him, what happens over there is that artha of following his elders becomes the Paramartha temporary. And he says, I cannot question my elders. But then one Sri Vaishnava commentator says that he takes that particular relationship and the dasya bhav as dasya dharma as more important than the pati dharma. Dasya dharma is what? Now they are slaves. But he's still the husband. It is his duty to protect his wife. But he thinks that dasya dharma is the higher dharma. That's why all the Pandavas, they are also in one sense culpable. Now, of course, from a transit, if you go back to the LEAD, we are all discussing the ethical perspective. From the devotional perspective, this was a pastime to illustrate how Krishna is the ultimate shelter. But Draupadi, during that extreme time, she takes shelter of Krishna. But after that, she does not give up the artha. And she understands that husbands are virtuous, but although they are virtuous, they made a bad thing. He made a bad decision at that time. And that bad decision was not because he had some. It was he wanted to avoid war. She said, let me listen to me. And we're hoping the elders will intervene at some time with that. But they didn't intervene at the end. His hope was, I'll at least one round of gambling. Arjuna is such a great devotee of Krishna. Surely Krishna will not let Arjuna be lost. Surely Krishna will not let Draupadi be lost. At least one round I will win. But the problem is in this world, good intention is not a substitute for good intelligence. Good intention is not a substitute for good intelligence. In one place, there was a devotee a leader, he wanted to build a big temple. And he had some temple funds and decided that he had a friend, not a devotee friend, who had invested money in shares and the money had multiplied. He said, I'm doing this for Krishna. So he invested money in the shares and it increased. Now there are different kinds of investments. Some are safer than others. But he was invested in a very volatile kind of thing. And one particular time they lost a huge amount. And he started thinking, okay, this is the money for the new temple. This was the money for the deities. This will surely not be lost. Krishna will not let this be lost. And he kept investing. And at the end, everything was lost. It was utter devastation. So the point is, good intention is not a substitute for good intelligence. So Yudhishthira's intention was good, but the intelligence was off. So Draupadi saw that his intention was not that. That's how she was able to stay with him. So even through that situation, she took shelter of Paramartha when Artha was not there. But after that, she did not reject the Artha. The Artha is normally the way we move towards Paramartha. She still was a faithful wife, and her husband were diligent protectors. And that's how they together went towards Paramartha. So for each one of us as devotees, we have to find the Artha that will take us toward Paramartha. We have to make sure that that Artha itself never becomes the Paramartha. So both extremes, letting Artha become the Paramartha and rejecting all Artha in the name of Paramartha. Can avoid both extremes. Every devotee can move through Artha towards Paramartha. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. So I talked about the acronym ACT. ACT. A was what? The approach. So the approach, I talked about four levels of approaches. What are the 4 levels? Literal, ethical, allegorical, and devotional. So we are focusing on the ethical approach today. And of course, not just the ethical approach, but how from the ethical level we can come to the devotional level. But this was our focus. The context I talked about was that how there can be different kinds of loss in life. And different kinds of loss can have different degree of pain. There can be loss of means, there can be loss of meaning, and there can be loss of both. So each of these is the most painful loss. Now this is generally called as Artha. Artha can refer to means as well as meaning. Now Arjuna is facing this level of loss. Now for each one, we discussed many examples of loss and how to deal with the loss. So, and then we discussed about T was transcendence. So there are 2 ways to transcendence, which are generally talked about. One is that there is progression from Artha to Paramartha. So progression means whatever is Artha, that enables us, that inspires us to move towards Paramartha. So there is progression. Now the other is that we reject Artha to go towards Paramartha. So we reject Artha and go towards Paramartha. So now that approach is very difficult to sustain. For most people, that will lead to problems. So we discuss various examples of how when we are going through life, when people have some sense of Artha, we should not destroy their sense of Artha. Most people cannot go towards Paramartha. So we discussed 2 extremes. That one is, if somebody is focusing only Artha, then what happens when the Artha becomes the Paramartha, that leads to Anartha. So wealth is important, but when wealth becomes the most important thing, that becomes a problem. But if it is only Paramartha, then also it is very difficult, and people will often relapse or fall to some much lower Artha. So rather, what we need to do is we find the Artha that can take us towards Paramartha. So whatever is giving us Artha in our life, we accept that. We accept the value and we see that it is not a disconnected Artha. It does not have independent Artha. This Artha is coming from Krishna, our parents' love, the joy that we get in some service. Is it spiritual? It is material? Doesn't matter. It is the services to Krishna. So we move from service to devotional service to pure devotional service. So expecting somebody to immediately come to the level of pure devotional service is going to be difficult. So we want to be free from pride. The way is not simply rejection of talent. Talent is Artha over here. So if we reject talent, that will not work, because then we may say, I don't want to become proud, but we will end up becoming jealous or envious of those who are having the talent. Instead of rejecting talent, what we do is we purify intent. Purify intent means that initially we will do that thing for artha. We may do it for fame. But from there, gradually, we will move towards the level of doing it for Krishna's pleasure. So in this way, every one of us can move in our life from artha towards paramartha. So let us pray to Krishna. My dear Lord, please help me to value the artha in my life and also appreciate that the artha gets its value from you, O Lord, who are the paramartha. And give me the intelligence by which I can work with the artha so that I can come closer to you, my Lord, who are the supreme paramartha. Krishna Bhagwan ki jai. Yes, Guru.
Thank you so much for very touching class.
You can speak loudly and repeat the question.
Thank you so much for very touching class. I was contemplating on the desire that you also brought in the picture.
Good point.
thinking
I was thinking
that,
I forgot something over here. So that was desire management, if we say. Go ahead.
So I was seeing desires as strategies to fulfill our needs.
Yes, that's what non-violent says, and that's true. Yeah.
And
go
so
ahead.
basically, I was saying that when we are filled with a lot of strategies, then it goes in the direction of rajas. And when we are lacking any strategy to deal with our needs, then basically it's tamas. So essentially, what we are doing is that we are trying to select strategies that can take us from artha to paramartha. That's the direction you are.
Yes. See, when you say desire the strategies to fulfill our needs, there could be three problems with that. First of us, we ourselves don't know the needs because sometimes the needs are deep within us. Second is that the strategy itself may be an unsound strategy. I say, I have a need to be respected. But the strategy I use is that whenever I feel disrespected, I start disrespecting others. I start insulting others. The strategy itself may be unsound. A third problem could be that we may have outgrown that strategy. That strategy served us at a particular time, like a child needs toys to play with. And if you tell a child, have no toys, that can be, child needs the shelter at that particular time. So, but then in terms of social and cultural convention, adults playing with toys is frowned upon. So naturally we tend to outgrow that. But we all have certain strategies which we have used at particular times in our life. And we may have outgrown those strategies, but still we default towards it. So bhakti means that, first of all, we understand what are our most important needs. The purification bhakti, we understand what are the most important needs and also understand what are the healthy ways to fulfill those needs. Thank you. Yes, Mataji.
Prabhu, I was trying to understand how in Lord Rama's pastime, his artha was to be a king, but his role was, I mean, he was Lord himself, so his paramartha also is like, it's like kind of serving his own self, right? He's the Lord. And in that context, I want to understand when Mother Sita was, when he told Lakshman to leave Mother Sita in the ashram, when she was carrying love and Kush. So would you like to elaborate, like, in this context, like what was playing out in his mind and what was his priority, in terms of his artha and paramartha?
Would I like to elaborate? No. I will. Some pastimes are very difficult to understand, and sometimes you cannot get a satisfactory understanding of things. All that you can get is the least unsatisfactory understanding. So I will share with you the understanding that I find least unsatisfactory. I have written books on the Ramayana, and I'm trying to write future also. And this is, I have many scholars of the Ramayana in our tradition, outside the tradition. I've talked with them. I try to read the traditional commentaries, whatever are available. But it is a very difficult pastime through all of it. So we'll talk about it. The key point is that there is context. That generally speaking, the principle is that if an action does not make sense, like if I do good, if I am polite with you and you are rude with me, I can say either you are a terrible person or I'm a worthless person. Or I can say maybe we have some history from behind because of which this is happening. So there are that way, okay, the world makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in this context. So in the immediate context, there is no way you can make sense. See, if a man abandons his pregnant wife over an unproven allegation, or rather an allegation that has been proven to be false, that man would not be considered even an ordinarily responsible person. What to speak of an ideal person? And if a civilization or a culture considers such a person to be ideal, that civilization should be condemned. So the point is that in the immediate context, there is no denying that it does not make any sense. So if we consider only the dynamic of the husband-wife relationship, the context of the husband-wife relationship. So then, this is the immediate context, the husband and wife relationship. So this is in this context, it's no sense at all. So then sometimes we may have to put it in a bigger context. Like Srila Prabhupada says that sometimes in a family, the mother-in-law may chastise her own daughter to instruct her daughter. So that the daughter may, I have not done anything wrong, but I'm being chastised, and she also understands, this is not meant for the daughter. So like that, sometimes we may speak one thing to one person, but somebody else is hearing. That thing is not meant for that person. That thing is meant for the other person. Now this person can become indignant. Why are you speaking this to me? I never did this. Understand, I have a purpose. I'll tell you later. It's like that. So in the context, it does not make any sense. So now we can broaden the context. So there are 4 levels of broadening that are possible. The first level of broadening is that Lord Ram is a husband, but he's also a king. Now, he has a relationship with the kingdom. And in one sense, in that cultural context, for Lord Ram to be with his wife, who was suspected of something inappropriate, that would have reflected that he was attached to her. And he was excessively attached to her. And because of that Raj Dharma, he had to choose between Raj Dharma and Pati. And he chose the Raj Dharma at that particular time. And that is a sacrifice. It is. Now, if you see, so at one context is Raja Dharma, he is chosen as more important than the Pati Dharma. So it is clear that he is not rejecting her as a person. And how do we know that? 3 things. First is he does not remarry. He's a king, he could easily have remarried. Now he maintains her word to her, his word to him that I'll be Ekapati. Now, apart from that, not only does not he maintain his word to her, he also does not think is royal duty when he has to perform yajnas. The Brahmanas say you need to have your bharya, your wife with you. So he actually creates a golden effigy of her. And he puts that golden effigy next to her. So now, which person do you even like? If you keep the photo of a person in your home, we keep the photo of people whom we love and respect. Now, if somebody has disgraced our family, if sometimes some cultures are very reputation conscious or honor conscious, and if some person has disgraced that family, they will actually like deny the existence of that person. They will not keep any photo in public. Even if there are albums, they will delete that person's photo from them. Like erase that person's existence. Far from erasing her existence, Lord Ram actually makes an effigy of her and puts that in the yajna. The yajna is a place where, so his putting that there itself is an indication that he has not rejected her. So he not only has not rejected her, not only he does not even believe that accusation. Because if he's considered her impure for a pure activity like a yajna, he would not put her. And even the Brahmanas don't object to it. So it is not her purity that is in question. And the third thing is, and although the word banishment can be used, that he banished her, it's not in the same sense in which Ram himself was banished. Because he sent her to Valmiki's ashram. And Valmiki's ashram was in Lord Ram's kingdom. So it is not that Valmiki's ashram was being troubled by Rakshasas or being predators and she was a physical threat. So in one sense, she was indirectly in his protection. So now what exactly about the Raja Dharma? This is where Indian culture, American culture are different. The idea of a person renouncing his family for the sake of the larger good. Now, that's something in Indian culture it's understood. The current Indian Prime Minister he has a wife, but he has never spent much time with his wife. He doesn't have children. So even Gandhiji was materially renounced. Some key leaders were not. But in the Indian ethos, like giving up the family for the sake of a larger cause is something which is accepted, even respected to some extent. But I have seen in America, people just don't understand this. Because America, they have the culture of the first lady. That that it's like you cannot be the president unless you have every politician generally, especially top politicians, they have to go with their family. And often they'll proudly say, although I am the president, my family comes first. And so that is a very different value system. So to some extent, the idea of Lord Ram sacrificing Pati Dharma for Raja Dharma, it's understandable for Indians. For Americans, it becomes much more difficult to understand. But this in the bigger context. Now, how would it have affected his being a king? It's a very cultural, contextual thing. So at that particular time, there was a particular time when purity of women was considered extremely important. And even in Europe, in the European tradition, there's a saying the Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. So that was, you could say, it's an unfair standard of purity that is expected of a woman, and especially in her case, she was not consenting at all. And all that is true. But every culture has its own ways of functioning. Now, that is the first context, that the Raja Dharma is prioritized over the Pati Dharma. Having said this, none of the acharyas who have commented on the Ramayana or even the tradition of the Ramayana considers this as the behavior to be normalized and adopted by everyone. India has one of the strongest family structures. In the West, families are falling apart. India also it's happening, unfortunately, but it's much lesser. The family structure is very resilient. And no book has inspired the Indian mind as much as the Ramayana. So if a core teaching of this book is that reject your wife over an unsubstantiated allegation, then that culture would not have been so family friendly or family support so family emphasizing. So within the tradition itself, from the story of the Ramayana, certain teachings are emphasized, certain teachings are not emphasized. And the Ramayana commentators of Sri Vaishnava tradition, they say that even Lakshman's following Ram is not to be imitated. That Sita is going with Ram, then they are a family unit. That is to be imitated. Lakshman's following Ram is glorious because Ram is God. But Lakshman's following Ram is actually unfair for Urmila. He didn't take her with him. So that, even that is not to be imitated. So that's why one of the key principles in understanding a text is to see how the tradition that has emerged from the text understands the text. So this is certainly not something to be imitated. Now the second context you could put it in is the context of previous life. Now we can say the Lord does not have a previous life, and that is true. But there is a story given in the Ramayana itself of a case where, I won't go into the full story, but Bhrigu Muni, his wife, I think her name is Kriti. Khyati, correct. So there is a demon who is being chased by, who has been terrorizing the universe, and that demon is being chased by, finally at a particular opportune time, Lord Vishnu corners him, is about to kill him. A demon flees and takes shelter in the ashram of Bhrigu Muni, where Khyati is there. And says, please save me. He says, Khyati. And Khyati says, I'll protect you. And Vishnu says, then, no, this is a terrible demon, I have to kill him. Khyati says, no, he's taken shelter of me, I will not kill him. And Vishnu says that this is a terrible demon. If we don't kill him at this time, he will continue terrorizing and destroying the universe. I have to kill him right now. This is the only time available. He says, no, I cannot let him. He's taking shelter of me. And he says, for the sake of the universe, I'll have to kill you to kill him. Yes, whatever you do, I'm not going to let him. Then Lord Vishnu kills Khyati and then he kills the demon. And Bhrigu Muni comes back. He's aghast. Lord Vishnu says, this is what happened, and I can revive Khyati right now for you. He says, how could you have killed a woman? You are meant to be a protector. He says, just as you have caused me to suffer separation from my wife, I curse you that you will suffer separation from your wife. So now the Lord is beyond all curses, but the Lord gracefully accepts that curse. So that curse later comes back. So when a curse from previous life acts, it may seem to have no rationale in this life. So that is another bigger context. So Sita herself was blameless, but it was something from the previous life that was playing out. And the third is, so that is the context of the book itself and the mood of the book or the mood of the larger Leela. See, in general, the Ramayan's mood is the mood of sacrifice. That, you see, Ram did not have to go on exile. Ram could have rebelled against his father and grabbed the kingdom. But Ram did not do that. So, Dashrath is not a victimizer. And Ram is not a victim. Both of them are caught in a circumstance. Now, to some extent, we can understand this circumstance because at least even now, the idea of honoring one's word is something which people do respect. Although I have seen young people ask the question, just clearly, why did Ram even have to go to the forest? He said, Dashrath had given a word a particular time. He said, this is blind obedience to somebody else's word. So we could say that, we could question that also, but at least it's understandable. Now what happens is this is seen as noble. Ram's nobility, Ram's selflessness. But Ram doesn't become bitter toward Dashrath, and Dashrath is not angry with Ram. There's no fault on Ram's side. So that same spirit of sacrifice that Ram and Dashrath show. So when Sita goes with Ram, Sita is giving up the kingdom, Lakshman is giving up the kingdom. That mood of sacrifice is the consistent theme of the Ramayana. And finally, what Dashrath does to Ram, Ram has to do to Sita. So it is not that Ram is the victimizer and Sita is the victim. Just as Dashrath is not the victimizer and Sita is not, Ram is not the victim. both Ram and Sita are caught in a circumstance. And that circumstance is just unfortunate circumstance. And both of them have to participate in a sacrifice. It's a painful sacrifice. Just as Dasharatha does not celebrate when Ram goes away. Ram does not celebrate, oh, there's an impure woman in my life, I got rid of her. There's absolutely no celebration. And just as Ram is not bitter towards Dasharatha, Sita is heartbroken when the Ram rejects her. Ram rejects also a strong word, but Ram abandons her. Whatever you want to say. That, but she understands. It's heartbroken. So at a level of emotion, she's completely shattered. But I understand why he has done this. And the test that she accepts is that she does not poison her children's mind about her. If there is a messy divorce in which, say, one person feels that the person has betrayed me, has manipulated me, has wronged me, and quite often the children are poisoned by it. So she does not do that. So is she pained by it? Is she heartbroken by it? Definitely. But is she bitter? Is she vindictive? Not at all. So the mood of sacrifice, of putting a larger principle above one's personal pleasure, that is the consistent mood of the Ram. This is Jata, you could have said that, okay, why should I fight against Ravan? He's clearly younger than me, faster than me. Sita does not fight against. She's like, how can I just stand by and let her be abducted? Even if it means my death, I have to try to fight. So it's a sacrifice. So sacrifice can come in many different forms. The broader principle of sacrifice is what is being illustrated. So these three contexts, the context of a larger dharma, the context of the previous life, and the context of the purpose of the Leela, can help us make sense of that pastime to some extent. Still, the problem comes to twofold. One is that this pastime is often seen through the feminist lens. That Ram is a man, and he's a male authority figure, and Sita is a woman, and she is victimized. And unfortunately, there have been many instances of patriarchal abuse of power. And so that all becomes very messy. But it does not have to be seen through that lens. So when we see it through that lens, then it becomes outrageous, not just unacceptable and outrageous. But that is not the lens that the Ramayana is seeing it through. That is not the lens in which the Ramayana tradition is encouraging us to see. So as I said that it's never become the norm in Indian society that a woman should be abandoned or rejected because of some unsuspected accusation. So that's one problem. And the second is that quite often there are some commentators who say that this pastime is an interpolation. Now, even there are some ISKCON leaders who go in that favor, and they say it's an interpolation by some people. Now, no one would be happier than me if this were an interpolation. In one sense, it would be a big relief. But it's difficult to make that argument because the traditional Uttarakhand, sometimes people say the whole Uttarakhand is an interpolation. But our prominent acharyas have not spoken like that. In the Sri Vaishnava tradition, they have written commentaries on this. And there are songs about Sita's agony, even Ram's agony. So this is definitely an inconvenient part of our tradition. But then, convenience is not necessarily the way we learn about lessons of transcendence. So if somebody wants to take that interpolation argument, it's up to them. But generally in the tradition, that's not what has been taken. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu. This is the most satisfactory answer.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, I don't know. Should we stop? Mataji.
So during it was wonderful discourse, and you mentioned that everyone should have a service, and not having service is an issue. So in our temple community, you find that devotees are naturally attracted towards different types of services. And for my sake of understanding and realization, I have categorized them into intellectual and physical services. And I see there is a phenomenon that sometimes like some devotees are naturally enthusiastic about intellectual engagements, such as kirtan, preaching, studying, discussing scriptures, while others take up physically demanding services like cooking, cleaning, duty worship, and maintenance, and so forth, and gardening. But there is sometimes an imbalance. Like physical services are often undervalued or neglected, leading to disorganization, chaos, some mismanagement, and sometimes even uncleanliness in the temple. And also it leads to unfair distribution of services. Like some devotees have a heavy burden of physically demanding services. And I'm not saying that intellectual services are not demanding physically as well as intellectually, but I feel there is unfair distribution. And also, then there is also limited opportunities for mutual growth in both categories of services. So I feel how can we, my question is how can we cultivate a more balanced and respectful culture where all types of services are valued equally and where devotees are given fair opportunities to participate in both physical and intellectual services for the holistic growth and smooth functioning of the temple. Sorry, I just asked ChatGPT to make it better whatever I wanted to ask. That's why I'm reading.
The ChatGPT also give an answer. So I don't know how much I'm qualified to answer this question because I have not done many physical services. The very few physical service I can do physically because of the situation. But I would say that I don't know whether kirtan can be called as an intellectual service, but I appreciate the broad classification. See, there are some services which are more visible and even glamorous. There are some services which will be less visible and less glamorous. Now, of course, there are some services which are more intellectual. The intellectual can be glamorous also. Now, some intellectual services may not be very glamorous also. If somebody becomes a preacher who's a crowd puller, that is much more glamorous. But somebody is a preacher who becomes a Shastra teacher, that person doesn't really get new people to come. That person is cultivating devotees. Then that's also glamorous to some extent. But it also depends. If somebody says nice Krishna Katha, then that person is a crowd puller. But somebody is going to Siddhanta, teaching Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav. There's not so much glamour in that kind of service. But broadly, I appreciate the question that there are certain services which people may want to do, devotees may want to do more. Other services devotees may not want to do. So what do we do in such situations? See, there is at one side the individual and the other side is the institution. So now one principle of dharma, the word dharma has many different meanings, but one simple meaning of dharma is that harmonious belonging. That we all belong to some larger wholes. If you're driving a car on the road, then we belong to the road transport system. We are participating in that. So then we are taking the facility from the road transport system and we have to do something for the road transport system. That is follow the rules, pay the taxes, whatever it is, follow the rules. So dharma essentially is harmonious belonging. So if you're sitting for this class, if somebody sits right in front with their back toward the speaker, that is disharmonious belonging. That will be disruptive for the class. So this harmonious belonging is dharma. So when we belong to an institution, then we also need to learn to belong harmoniously to the institution. Now, harmonious belonging has to happen in both ways. And Krishna uses the word dharma. He uses it both at an individual level and at an institutional level. At an individual level, when Arjuna is asking, Prachami tvam dharma sammodhacheta, saying, what is the right thing for me to do? And Krishna says, Dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge. At that time, he says, I come to establish Dharma. What does that mean? I come to establish the social order that is virtuous, that is good. So, for example, now, when we are being a part of the road transport system, say, if the road transport system is also just and fair, that means whoever follows the rules, they are allowed to go peacefully. Those who break the rules, they are pulled over. They are penalized, they are fined or whatever. But if the road transport system, the legal system in this case, the law and order system is perceived as partial, say people from one community are allowed to go free even if they break the rules, people from another community are pulled over more, then what happens is the dharma has to work both ways. The collective has to take care of the individual, and the individual has to contribute to the collective. That's the ideal way to practice dharma. So then it's a dharmic society with dharmic individuals in the society. Now, from our perspective, what happens is that we are individuals, some of us may also be leaders. Then we have to play our role in contributing to the community, but then we may also be leaders who are upholding the community. So it depends a lot on the community leaders. If the community leaders show favor or especially praise certain services, then what happens? Everybody wants to be appreciated, recognized. And that's not a part of the ego. That's just a human need. The world is so big and our existence can seem so tiny, even within the movement. We all want to be valued. So, whatever is the ethos that is built in the community, then that is what everyone else will want to do. Everyone will want to do. So, if some communities are focused very much on, say, fundraising for building a temple, and then fundraisers are constantly glorified, or some communities focus only on book distribution, then book distributors are glorified. If some communities focus on youth outreach, then only those who are doing youth outreach are glorified, others are not. Then what will happen is, it's like the rewards from the community are coming especially for one group. Then everybody will want to belong to that group. And other services will get neglected. And I've seen this happen in almost every community, where now naturally the leader of the community or the leaders of the community will have certain inspiration themselves, and they'll prioritize some things. But the challenge is, while prioritizing some things, other things should not be devalued. Like this, all of this is valuable. This is what is most valuable for us right now. So that is one big aspect. That what is the dharma of the community that is being followed. So if various services are recognized, there may be appropriate forums for recognizing those services. But say sometimes after a municipal marathon, there may be some, or after fundraising marathon or whatever, after the temple is inaugurated or whatever, there's a celebration, and there is for everyone, not just for the big fundraisers, but all those who contributed to the service. Then what happens is everybody feels valued. So that harmonious belonging requires that the harmony also come from top to the bottom. That's one side. And the other side is from the bottom, the individual towards the institution. Within that, there is you could say there's dharma and there's apad dharma. Apad dharma is in an emergency, due to emergency. So in general, one principle of varnashram is everybody serve according to their nature. Now, of course, what is whose nature, that's also, it takes some time to figure out. And if we leave it completely to individual, or individuals leave it to their mind. So what is your nature? The mind will say, whatever service you are doing right now, that is not according to your nature. But the mind always keeps us dissatisfied. There'll always be some, even in the services that we like to do, there is something which we don't like, isn't it? So there's never an ideal situation in the world. Even if somebody likes to preach, but then along with preaching, you have to make sure the logistics are right. I don't want to arrange the logistics, I only want to preach. Okay, then you can become a traveling preacher, and others will arrange the logistics for you. But then you have to arrange the traveling. Isn't it? So now, even the services, so if somebody thinks I'll only do whatever I like, then that is not the spirit of Dharma. What Krishna says to Arjuna is that Sarvarambhahi doshena dhumena, that every endeavor is covered by fault. So individuals also need to recognize that we cannot just be doing what we like to do and take advantage. Because even in what we like to do, there will be something which we don't like to do. And we are belonging to a community. So sometimes we may need to do things which we may not like to do. So which we may feel is not our nature. So in general, in the initial stage of a community, devotees need to be trained, or in the initial stage of spiritual life also, devotees need to be trained to do whatever service they are called to do. And that way, that mood of service attitude is inculcated. However, as time progresses, each devotee, we don't just want devotees to serve. We want devotees to sustain themselves in service. And for that purpose, if a devotee can understand their swabhava and serve according to their swabhava, then that ethos is healthy. Because see, if we are serving according to our nature, we will be self-motivated in that service. Nobody else needs to push us. If somebody likes to study Shastra and they teach Shastra, nobody is watching them, so they'll be studying Shastra. Somebody likes Kirtan, even nobody is watching them, they'll be learning new tunes, they'll be learning new things, be improving their Kirtan skills. Somebody likes cooking. Even if there's no big service, no senior devotee coming to for or not festival which you have to book, they'll be honing their skills. So for the purpose of longevity of a devotee, we need to eventually engage devotees in services according to their nature. What they feel naturally drawn to do, whatever they feel inspired, whatever they're talented in doing. So one system that I have seen work in certain communities is that for the first 5 years, for the first 3 years, for the first 10 years, whatever, for the first few years, the devotees are trained to do whatever service you do. And then after some time, by mutual discussion between the authorities and the subordinate, the devotees move towards service of their orientation. And that becomes an understanding within the community. That initially you learn service attitude, and as you go senior, then you also understand your swabhava better. And then you move towards the services that you naturally feel inspired. So if that principle is applied fairly, then what happens is everybody accepts that principle. And then afterwards, it moves forward. So then what happens is we give room for individuality. So like I was in Radha Gopinath community, we asked Radha Maharaj, some devotees are introvert. For them to be together with people is very exhausting. 3-4 of us had gone to Radha, like coming for the morning program. It's like emotionally draining. It's spiritually energizing. It's emotionally completely draining. Just meeting people, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So we asked Maharaj, Maharaj said, I said that, he said that if that is really the case, you have been practicing bhakti for 15-20 years, you have to assess what gives you spiritual strength. Because if you don't want to come for the morning program, I trust you. We won't be enforcing it for those who are seeing. But then if we don't enforce it for anyone, then nobody will be trained. So there has to be some accommodation for people according to their nature. Nature is not just one, nature can be in very different ways. So the thing is that, but that cannot be made the norm right from the beginning. So in the Radha Gopinath temple, the system is that for the first 5-10 years, devotees should be very serious about their morning program attendance. For the first 3-4 years, I'm talking about the Brahmachari Ashram family, and they do whatever service they are told to. And as they move forward, then they find that service according to their swabhava and they engage accordingly. So that's one system that has worked, I've seen. So the other way is that the other thing is that when you're talking about artha, that was the theme over here. See, either the devotee has to find artha naturally in a particular service. Like for some devotees, visible services are overwhelming for them. I would much rather be in the background. That could be humility, but that could also be their nature. They just naturally like to be in the background and do some services. So some devotees may like to do physical services. And that's great. So either the artha comes naturally for them, or the artha has to be created. Created means what? We have to show them the artha. That what is the artha over here? That this is how this serves. So maybe in the classes that those themes are emphasized, or there are some other ways in which those devotees are recognized and valued. So when that is taken care of, so then it happens that both the individual and the collective. The individual training has to be there, and the collective managerial vigilance also has to be there. So that then there are different kinds of artha that will take us towards paramartha. So it's like, if you consider this is paramartha, and this is artha. So if people start thinking that there's only one path from here, that say for example during Prabhupada's time there was a notion that book distributors were please Prabhupada a lot. That is true. When Prabhupada was asked what pleases you the most, he said, you love Krishna. So it is not that there is one path from here to here. And then everybody, whichever service you're doing, you have to come to this particular service. And only then you can grow towards Krishna. That's not the understanding. We have had some very moving stories of devotees who were never visible and very prominent preachers. And then in the last moment, they had some extraordinary experiences of Krishna. And they were all in the background doing some small services. So the idea is, it is from wherever you are, wherever we find artha, from there we can move towards Paramartha. So there is a story of Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and there was one widow who Prabhupada would see from her window that every morning she would go and pluck flowers, even if it was cold, and she would go, and sometimes she would wake up the pujari actually, and tell, these are the flowers for the deities. And Prabhupada said that because she is doing this service, she will go back to Krishna. So it is not, so if we create that ethos, that every service can actually take you closer to Krishna, and that we value you for the service. And naturally, based on the phase in which the community is, some services will be glorified more than others. So, generally in the morning program, we glorify the book distribution suite, talk about the book distribution suite. Why? That itself leads to that book distribution being glorified as a very important service. We don't mention any other services. Now, other services are also quantified. In some temples, they don't just glorify book distribution, they also add fundraisers. They say, oh, this person raised this much fund, this much funds. Now, okay, that was not the tradition, but maybe that is required at that particular time. But then we can't make a list of all the services that are done throughout the day and make a list to glorify the devotees. But we need to, so within the existing system, some services may be glorified. But then it is important to create the system for appreciating and valuing other services also. So it's like that artha has to be, going back to this particular diagram. The artha, so it is that individual should feel the artha in that thing, and the collective should also create the artha, sense of artha. When both happen, then it will move forward very nicely. So I was once with Jayadvaita Maharaj, and we were talking various things. I said, Maharaj, what has given you faith in Krishna consciousness? Like we often ask questions, what brought you to Krishna consciousness? So once I was trying to start a podcast, what kept you in Krishna consciousness? But you would that is the, talk about all the skeletons in our closet for that. So I often ask this to devote at an individual level. So Maharaj is amazing. He said that there's a pujari in Vrindavan. He of course departed. This was few years ago. He said that pujari, whenever I go to Vrindavan, I see him. He's an elderly devotee. Sometimes there's pujari service. He says he's there serving Charan. Yeah. So he said that he has been there for years. Whenever I go there, he's peaceful. And he's not a very well-known devotee. He's not a world-famous devotee. So that the devotee has been able to do this service year after year after year is the proof that Krishna consciousness is that without any recognition by the world, that he is getting some satisfaction. That's why he's doing the service. And now that is a remarkable level of recognition. I mean, there's no recognition in the institutional apparatus, but one particular institution is recognizing this is important. So we need to have that system of artha, that infusing artha or infusing value and meaning to various services. And of course, devotees need to be encouraged to see the artha in the service. So when both ways happen, then it's possible that the community can be properly taken care of. And so the temples or the organization's needs, there is the devotees' needs and then the community needs. Both can be harmonized. It's a tension. It needs continuous monitoring and discussion and sometimes negotiation, but it is possible. Okay. You want to add something? Okay, this is a long class now. You want to? Okay. Yes, thank you. Did I answer the question, Mataji, for you?
Yes, sir.
It's short. I hope it's a short question.
Short question. A couple of comments also, because I recently heard Gauradarshan Prabhu in the beginning at Govardhani village, his service was to make praise, and later he did other things. And also about your glorification, there is a famous professor at MIT who says that whatever attitudes are glorified, that becomes drives the culture of the company. His paper is on firefighting. So a lot of corporations celebrate firefighting, and so the entire culture becomes that. Actually, my question was about a bigger, slightly different context. In Massachusetts, there are a lot of Indians, and Indians are typically, attracted to Sanatana Dharma. And but what I notice is that about 30% of the people are attracted to service. Very, very small percentage are attracted to devotional service. And the organizations that do volunteer activities like working, being a maybe a soccer coach or raising money for schools or something like that, those are very popular, but devotional service is not popular. Maybe you can add, help us with what we can do, or what can be done to encourage.
True. See, Mr. Prabhupada explains what is realization. He says that this is the message of scripture, and these are the current interests of people. So he says realization means to present the message of scripture in a way that is interesting for them. So now we could say that people's interest needs to be elevated so that they become interested in scripture. That is true, but that's not going to happen automatically. That has to be done incrementally. So we need to find out this intersection, and we need to present scripture accordingly. So now, of course, we have to see what is happening. Are people coming from here to here, or are people going from here to here? So is it that people who have mundane interests are becoming interested in scripture, or is it that people who are interested in scripture are becoming interested in mundane activity? To figure that out. So this was one of the reasons why I started commenting on movies. That many people are interested in movies, but then we have spiritual comedy. There's a Christian pastor who has become the world's one of the most popular on social media through just commenting on videos. He's based in Los Angeles. So now the thing is that there is always this danger. There are people who are watching movies, getting interested in the Bhagavad Gita by looking at Bhagavad Gita perspectives, or are people who are reading Bhagavad Gita become interested in the movie because of the Bhagavad Gita perspective. So that's the challenge. And there's no. So some people will focus on this possibility and want to do it. Others will say focus on this possibility and don't do it. There'll always be opinions like that. And now the conservatives will focus more on stick to the tradition. The liberals will say more to connect with the contemporary world. So who is right, who is wrong, it depends. It also depends on individual nature, it depends on the context of the situation. So, but in general, this is required. This is the enduring principle. So when Prabhupada came to America, he focused on the counterculture. That's where he found that people were interested. Prabhupada adopted terms like stay high forever. Prabhupada used terms like, what was it? Sunday love feast. So then when Prabhupada adopted terms, and Prabhupada to some extent did certain things. Now when Prabhupada went to India, he saw that India was having some kind of a sense of cultural national pride. And that's why he focused on that. Bhagavad Gita is a book from India. And to teach Bhagavad Gita in India, I have to get Americans to come here. This is Indian, this is your book. You learn it and you teach it. So now Bhagavad Gita is not an Indian book. Bhagavad Gita is a universal book. There's no mention of India in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? But Prabhupada took that. This is your interest. This is where you can tap. So we also need to be alert to see how we can tap. So, for example, now several places our movement has gone into environmental initiatives. Now we could draw certain sections from scripture which do talk about environment and environmental outreach or concern for environment. But that's not a central theme of the scripture. But there are some projects where a lot of people are interested in taking care of the environment. And then if we show them a project where, based on the inspiration of the scripture, the environment can be taken care of, then what happens is those people will become interested. Now, but for that purpose, we may have to become interested in the environment. Isn't it? It cannot be just a show thing. We have to do some tangible environmental work. People see that, and then they become interested in the people who are interested in Krishna. So there's one devotee in the Govardhana Village itself. He had to do a lot of environmental research. So he once told Radhanath Maharaj that, Maharaj, I came to study about Krishna, not about the environment. So Maharaj said, you have to become interested in the environment so that people who are interested in the environment will become interested in Krishna. So now, can everybody do that? Not necessarily. Some people may just be no interest. Scientific outreach is like that. Some of us may have to study some scientific theory. Some of us may some devotees may create a scientific forum for outreach. So like that, humanitarian outreach can also be like that. We can open hospitals, we can open schools. So ISKCON in India is now doing tribal care. Initially, we were calling tribal preaching. But then what happened was that those areas, a lot of Christian conversion is happening in India. And then the local politicians, the Hindu politicians, they started saying that, when you Hare Krishnas come and preach, you get the people to wear your clothes, wear your food, do your worship. And when the Christians come, they do the same thing. So basically, the local tribal culture is being lost. So then our devotees tone things down. So now we don't call it tribal preaching, we don't call it tribal outreach, we call it tribal care. Not just a change in nomenclature. We encourage the tribals to continue with their culture. They worship Krishna, of course, but we preserve the culture. So now a lot of people are being inspired to contribute to tribal outreach, tribal care. So the devotees were taking initiative like that. So now some devotees, so like that, Prabhupada also started Food for Life. So now we as devotees need to find out what are the current interests of the audience and see how we can connect with those interests. To start, yoga has been one of the most, I would say, successful forms of connection with the broader world. So, especially in the Western world. Now, is it that devotees are becoming interested in yoga because of that? Yes, to some extent, yes. But yoga is good for health. Yoga is something from our broader tradition only. Is it that devotees are doing yoga sadhana and not doing Hare Krishna sadhana? If that were happening, it would be a problem. That's not generally not happening. So we need to create forums like that as an institution and as an individual also. Sometimes the institution may have a particular focus, but individuals can be inspired and they can do certain things, not define the institution, but extending the reach of the institution. Actually, in the Catholic Church, they say that most of the Catholic outreach is happening not because of the church, but in spite of the church. What they mean by that is, not all churches, but Catholic Church was hit by a lot of child abuse scandals. The whole thing started in Boston itself. In 2004, the Boston Globe exposed not the child abuse scandal, it was the cover-up of the child abuse scandal. The award-winning documentary called Spotlight made out of it. So now, but there are other sister organizations. Like in India, if you see the Christian conversion doesn't happen through the churches, it always happens through the schools, through the hospitals, through the humanitarian world. So there can be sister concerns like that, which can be created. And they can also do a lot of outreach. So I would say that there is an increasing instinct toward, you could use the word volunteerism. Volunteerism has a particular philosophical meaning, is quite different, but the spirit of being a volunteer, volunteering for some activities. So we need to create forums for volunteering. I know one college outreach here in America where they were trying to get people to come, people not coming only. So then they create a Food for Life initiative. This is for Westerners. They create a Food for Life initiative. And what happened was that it started coming, then they would observe this something which is cool for them. They could tell their friend, they could put it in extracurricular activities in their CV. And this devotee told me that that many big people would come to actually serve food. In America, serving a soup is considered it's not a word for it, but it's considered to be a people. So he said that we were never able to get Western people to come, but then while they're cooking, we would have a spiritual atmosphere, we would teach them to offer the food to Krishna. That's how we spend time with them. So there are different ways in which this can be done. There has to be a certain level of creativity, and often certain level of autonomy is required to take the initiative. Or initiative is required, the autonomy needs to be provided so that that kind of creativity can be utilized. And then we also have to be constant monitoring. What is actually happening? Is it that through this devotees are going in that direction? Or is it that people who are from there are coming towards Bhakti? Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakti ki, Gaur.